God kveld og hjertelig velkommen til Cinemateket. Velkommen til den første dagen av et 2-dagers seminar om den italienske neorealismen som vi arrangerer i samarbeid med det italienske kulturinstituttet og universitetet i Oslo. Dette seminaret vil foregå i form av 4 bolker, der vi skal vise 4 filmer med tilhørende foredrag. Det vil foregå både på engelsk og på norsk. Her i kveld så skal det være på engelsk, og de 3 sesjonene i morgen vil foregå på norsk. Så derfor skal jeg da like godt gå over til engelsk. On behalf of the Norwegian Film Institute, I have the great pleasure and honor for welcoming you to the 9th edition of a seminar on Italian cinema that the Cinemateket is arranging in collaboration with the Italian Cultural Institute and the University of Oslo. And I would just start by thanking our partners in the project, Ove Solum, Helge Rønning, and also Jon Inge Faldan from the University of Oslo, and the director Matteo Fazzi and Ale Woll from the Italian Cultural Institute. So please acknowledge their contributions in this. Previous years we've done seminars on some of the leading talents in Italian cinema and some of the important themes. We've done seminars on Fellini, Antonioni, Pasolini, Visconti. We've done seminars on Italian film music, on political cinema. Last year we did a seminar on Italian cinema and music. And this year we're going to dedicate the seminar to one of the most, perhaps the most important trend in or chapter in the Italian cinema, especially particularly the Italian Neorealism, which contains some of the most important works in not only the Italian film history but in the international film history. Tomorrow we're screening the films The Bicycle Thieves, Umberto D. and Bitter Rice. Tonight we're especially happy to welcome back to Cinemateket Caterina D'Amico. She's been here before. 6 years ago she held the opening speech to our seminar on Luchino Visconti. So we're really happy to have Caterina D'Amico back for another Visconti film, namely Ossessione, which is opening our Neorealism seminar today. Caterina D'Amico is known for a lot of things in Italy. She's been working for the Scuola Nazionale del Cinema. She's worked for the Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia. She's worked for the cinema department of the Rai Television. She's curated numerous retrospectives and exhibitions. She's a writer and an author. She's written about a number of subjects on cinema and the performing arts, and especially the cinema of Luchino Visconti. Her mother, Susu Cecchi D'Amico, was one of the leading screenwriters in Italian cinema. She worked closely with Visconti, and she also wrote the screenplays for many really important films from the Italian film history. The Bicycle Thieves is only one of them. So now I would like to leave this floor to Caterina D'Amico, who will give again the opening lecture for our seminar on Italian cinema, this time Neorealism, and after her lecture we will screen Ossessione, the first feature film by Luchino Visconti. So please give the warmest of welcomes to Caterina D'Amico.
Thank you. What an introduction. Embarrassing. Now, I'm very, very happy to be back here after 6 years. I hear that the lecture, the speech I gave then, left a good memory, and I strongly hope not to disappoint you this time. Now, I'm supposed to speak about Ossessione, which is a movie that is considered to be at the root of neorealism. And before telling very simply, in simple words, the story of Ossessione, I would like to set it in the proper time. Now, to be very brief, to squeeze the information as much as I can, I must recall the fact that the culture, the European, the Western world culture, broadly speaking, at the beginning of the 20th century, was drawing from the romantic movement through the verism towards decadentism. Let's say, these are the names of trends of culture that run through literature, through the visual arts, through music, through the various aspects of the art, and they meant that from culture, that the art, broadly speaking, were meant until then as a sort of rest, as a sort of research for harmony and peace and pleasure. What we witness at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, is that art altogether becomes not so pleasant to look at or to listen to, but contains disturbing elements. It aims not to bring peace and enjoyment, but rather to bring thought. It becomes troublesome. We don't tell and we don't read the stories of the great people, of the great heroes. We are told suddenly the stories of common people and of their problems and of their failures. And we start reading things that don't end well. They don't have the nice closing sentence, and they lived happily ever after. We see this happening in visual arts. Visual arts are not decorative anymore. They are troublesome. They bring anxiety. And this type of art conquers slowly all the Western world. At the same time, we witness the coming into power of totalitarian regimes, who of course don't like that, because they aim at giving the population the feeling that everything is going perfectly well and that everybody is perfectly happy and there are no problems, and all you have to do is just let yourself go, and we, the people in charge, will look after you. And you don't have to talk, to think about things, just relax. So what happens in Italy? We have the coming of the fascism, and fascism sort of stops these cultural movements. I don't mean that it kills the artists. Simply tries not to disseminate this type of art. We don't go to the extreme of the Germans, who have exhibitions of so-called degenerated art. But indeed, in all the public manifestation, on all the events that are sponsored by the Ministry of Culture, you won't find any work of art that is troublesome. And slowly, between 1922, when fascism gets to power until the war, we have increasingly censorship that takes over. And certain books are not printed anymore, and foreign books are not imported anymore, and it's put to, it's a sort of cork that it's put strongly on a bottle that contains all these bubbles. This is particularly true for cinema, because cinema, as another dictator said, is the strongest of the weapons. And because it has a potential, it's the most popular. And cinema becomes very, very soon, in the hands of the fascist regime, a tool of propaganda. A tool to propose and impose, I would say, cultural models. It portrays the Italy that the regime would like it to be. To the point that during the fascism, well, up until a few years ago, in Italy we had censorship for cinema. I don't know what it happens here in Norway, but a movie before being released needed to have a sort of approval from a commission that was set up by the Ministry of Culture that said that this film could be released publicly, or if it was suitable for children, or if it was suitable for adolescents, or if it was suitable only for adults. This was until very recently. But in fascist time, it was much more severe than that, because censorship could block a film before being made. Because every film that was made had to the project, the written project, the outline of the script had to be given to the Ministry of Culture, who then said, yes, this film can be made, or no, this film cannot be made. So this is Italy in 1940. Who is Visconti in 1940? Luchino Visconti is an Italian director who in 1940 had not directed anything at all, therefore he was not a director. He then was born in 1906. I noticed today that in 1906 Ibsen died, so there's a connection with Norway somehow. And he is born in a very aristocratic family, which is not only aristocratic from his father's side. His family was a family that ruled half of Italy for a couple of centuries during the Renaissance. But it's also a very rich family on his mother's side, because his mother had inherited the largest pharmaceutical industry in Italy. Therefore, she was a pretty wealthy woman. So Visconti was definitely what we call privileged race. And what did he do? Oh, well, not much. In the 40s, he was breeding horses, race horses, and was traveling Europe with his horses, winning awards, cups. But his family was not only aristocrat and rich. Strangely enough, was also a cultivated family. The two things don't come always together, but in his case, yes. They were particularly fond of theatre, but they also were very fond of music and of literature. In the family, everybody played at least one instrument, and they were eagerly reading books. Visconti himself remembered that when Proust Recherche was published in France, his father got to the volumes one by one as soon as they were printed, because he was very, very interested in reading, therefore not only in Italian, also in French, and definitely also in English and in German. So, as a privileged person, he was also cultivated. He had nice upper-class friends, and he traveled, which was not so popular, not so easy in Italy in the 30s. To have a passport was rather complicated, but he had one, and he traveled. He went to Germany, he went to Austria, he went to France in 36. And there he met lots of, let's say, VIPs of the time, that in France were rather different from the VIPs in Italy in the same days. Italy was much more provincial, and France was much more cultural and much more open. And he got in touch with all those bunch of people who made culture in Paris at the moment. Through Coco Chanel, because it's the first person he met in France, he got acquainted with Jean Cocteau, Jean Renoir, all the people who made movies and made art and made theatre. And that opened his mind towards a type of art that in Italy was non-existent, because there verism had developed into what we call the French naturalism, especially in cinema, a way of telling stories that was very much connected with real life and with real people. And he liked that very much. And he asked Renoir to be close to him while he was shooting the movie, and he was a sort of voluntary assistant for a minor movie of Jean Renoir. And then he traveled again. He went to the States. He went to see the movie making until Los Angeles. And then he came back to Italy. And at the beginning of 39, his mother, to whom he was very attached, died in Milan. Visconti was from Milan. And so when in April 39, Jean Renoir asks him to join him in Rome, because Jean Renoir was about to shoot a movie that was based on Tosca by Sardou, not Puccini's Tosca, Sardou's Tosca. Visconti said yes and moved to Rome. He didn't know then, but it was for good. He always lived in Rome since then, and started to work with Renoir at the preparation of Tosca as second assistant. Evidently, Renoir needed a Roman assistant to make the movie, even if this assistant was not experienced at all. The movie starts, they start shooting, the war breaks through, and Jean Renoir, who's French, has to leave Italy. Italy is not at war, but it's an ally to Germany. The war breaks up between Germany and France, and so Renoir has to leave. The film will be taken over by his first assistant, who is Karl Koch, who has also a German passport, although he is a fervent anti-fascist that has left Germany already some years ago. And the film goes on, and Visconti becomes the first assistant to Karl Koch, and most of all becomes friends of the friends of Karl Koch, who is a fervent anti-fascist, and who are his friends. His friends are a bunch of very young filmmakers who have just finished school at what is now called the National Film School, Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia, and who are all very strong leftist people. Two of them want to dream of becoming writers, and they are Gianni Puccini and Giuseppe De Santis, and they will both be filmmakers instead. Giuseppe De Santis, you'll see Bitter Rice tomorrow. And other two are politicians that will be leading figures in the to-be Communist Party after the Second World War, and they are Mario Alicata and Pietro Ingrao. Mario Alicata was also a literary critic. So, this is Visconti in 1940. In 1941, he's in Rome, Tosca is finished, he sells all his horses and decides to become a film director. And the first act, as a future film director, he writes an article that is printed in the Rivista Cinema, and whose title is Cadaveri, which means corpses. Who are the corpses? The corpses are the filmmakers of that moment. And he denounces in this article the fact that people who make movies, directors, producers, writers, whoever, they're all dead. Who are they? Now, between 39 and 41, how many movies made Italy? How active was in the movies Italy? It's really hard to believe, but these are the figures. These are the Italian films released in Italy. So an outrageous number of movies. Italy was very, very actively making movies that were nearly all sponsored by the states and co-financed by the state, because the big production was in the hand of the state. And it's evident that the effort to distract the people from the war that was rumbling and that was coming closer. Italy will enter in war in 1941, and in 1942 we see 109 Italian films on the screen. Which type of movies? Well, I can divide them in four major categories. One is the historical movies. I here just show you a few posters with titles to give you the feeling and the aesthetic of the movies that were on. Mind you, sometimes they were also very good movies, but they told histories that were far away. Another type of movies, literary movies, films taken from important Italian literary works, important novels, again, far away stories. Or third group, war things, things that related to war, that were meant to reinforce the importance and the glory and the joy of being at war. or a few films devoted to small bourgeois stories. They are generally light-hearted, nice. Everybody, first of all, speaks wonderful Italian. Dialects are forbidden. In those 20 years, we don't have films in dialect. Nobody speaks dialect, because we have to form also the language in Italy. So this middle class, it's very neat and very good, and everything is in order and in place. This film is rather special, Quattro passi tra le nuvole, and this is why I chose it, because in another way he is also considered a sort of ancestor of neorealism. Now, before coming to this image, which I clicked on too early, I stop here, and I go back to Visconti. So this is the panorama that we have on the Italian screens, and what do Visconti and his colleagues, his new friends, aim at? They decided to get back from where the cork was put on the bottle, and to get back on the Italian verism. And they pick up Verga, which is the great Italian realist writer of the end of the 19th century. And Visconti buys the rights of 4 novels of Verga in the attempt to make a movie based on one of them. And they write a first script for a movie that was taken from a novel called L'amante di Gramigna, Gramigna's lover. Gramigna is, oddio, un brigante, come si dice in inglese? A robber, a bandit. And they prepare the project. They endorsed the project to the ministry, and then they are told that the Minister of Culture, Alessandro Pavolini, has written on the first page of the script, basta con questi briganti, enough with those bandits. And so they understand that the project will never pass, and they set it aside. And they start looking away. They consider Maupassant, and they consider even works by Edith Wharton. And then Visconti takes up a novel that has not been published in Italy, that it's an American novel called The Postman Always Rings Twice by James Cain, and that he has in a French translation, not in English, because Jean Renoir has given it to him. This novel circulated in France in French, and in those years Pierre Chenal made a movie called Le Dernier Tournant, based on this novel. Nobody knows whether Visconti had seen this movie or not. It's even possible, because it was released at the end of the 30s in France. But probably not. Probably he just read the novel. And he thought to adapt the novel in an Italian setting, to make it Italian, because he found that this American novel, had elements that could be translated in Italy. They start working, and they endorsed the project to the ministry. And quite surprisingly, in January 42, the project is accepted. After all, it's just a woman that has a lover, a married woman. It's a story of an adultery that ends up with with a murder, and then they are punished. So why not? I mean, it's a moral story. It's dark, but it's moral. They work on the script. Those four people I mentioned, Visconti, Gianni Puccini, Mario Alicata, and Giuseppe De Santis, and each of them brings something to the story. First of all, Visconti brings the landscape. He knows very well the plain, the Italian plain below Milan, around the River Po, which reminds him of the America of the New Deal, that type of road movies. He feels that in that plain, that type of story can be told. There's the heat there, there's the fog, there are all sorts of physical aspects that we are accustomed to see in the American movies, but not in these movies, that he wants to transfer on the screen. Gianni Puccini, who is from Marche, is a region in Italy, brings the town of Ancona, where a part of the story will take place. And the other two, Alicata and Pietro Ingrao, bring the political side and put a character that is not in the novel, which is the character that is called the Spanish guy in the movie. It's a character that doesn't play a role in the story. It's a sort of diversion, but he has two aspects that sound extremely provocatively anti-fascist at the moment, at the epoch. Now to us, it doesn't mean anything, but then apparently it was very powerful, the allusion. First of all, he is a man without a job, like the main character. They are both jobless people, very poor, proletarian, and they show there is a sort of immediate solidarity between them that is regarded by the two writers as the socialist fundamental solidarity between two proletarians. And then the factor that is called the Spanish one, that hints that probably he has been as a voluntary in the civil war in Spain, and that he's come back from Spain after the defeat of the militant. So these two elements are regarded very strongly anti-fascist, and they write the movie. They put together a strong equipe to make the movie, because they don't rely too much on the fact that Visconti is capable of holding the movie. He's done nothing in his life of the kind, and therefore they fill the movie with young filmmakers that have just come out of the film school, like Gianni Puccini himself, Gianni Di Venanzo, who is to become one of the greatest DOPs of Italy, who is recruited as the camera man, while Aldo Tonti is the DOP. Aldo Tonti is a very established, considered probably the top DOP of the moment in Italy. A nice thing, there's war going on in Italy in 42, and when they have to put together the troupe of the camera crew, Tonti calls a very good, experienced man as a second assistant, who's doing the military service. He's been called as a soldier, and he sends his younger brother, who's just 17, and he is Carlo Di Palma, who's going to become another great DOP, Italian DOP. And Carlo Di Palma is very thin and looks younger, and when he arrives on the set, Visconti says, but he's a child. I cannot allow him to have a troupe with children. But then he takes them. Who are the actors? The main actors that Visconti chooses are Massimo Girotti, whom you have seen on one of these posters, because he's already an established, good-looking man, and Anna Magnani, who is supposed to be the lead in the movie. Anna Magnani, that you certainly remember like this, from Open City in 1945, therefore just only 3 years later. But Anna Magnani in 42 was not like this, was very different. She had not made Roma Città Aperta. She was a theatre actress who had done a lot of theatre. She started acting on stage in 28, therefore 13 years earlier, playing small secondary role, especially in light-hearted comedies and in half musical things, because she could sing very well. She was seen as a character, especially in light-hearted comedies, not a dramatic actress at all. And she had made very few movies. I show you pictures of her in the movies she had made. This is in 34, her first movie. Here she plays a singer in Cavalleria, 36, always supporting characters, very minor roles. This is another movie, 30 Secondi d'Amore. She's a sort of Betty in La Fugitiva, very small role. This is the only more important role she had played up to then, in Teresa Venerdì, where she plays a singer, but again, a supporting role, not a lead. So the idea of Visconti of involving Magnani is very, very, very strange, because the image that Magnani has then is completely different. And yet, he takes her, and the movie starts. They start shooting June 15 in 1942. The first 4 days, Magnani is not foreseen, because she is still busy shooting a movie in Turin. She arrives on the set in Ferrara on the 5th day of shooting, late at night, after a very long and troublesome train trip from Turin. And very proudly, she announces to the line producer who's there, Libero Solaroli, that she's pregnant. And he says, how good for you. But I'm happy that you rejoice, but you can't make the movie. And she says, why not? I'm just 2 months. And he says, no way. This is going to be a very long movie because Visconti shoots maximum 3 shots a day. He's excellent, he's marvelous, and we enjoy his way of working, but this film is going to be filmed for at least 3-4 months, and it'll show you cannot make a movie. She says, no way, I'm staying here. She occupies the only room with private bathroom in the best hotel of the city of Ferrara and says, here I am ready to shoot tomorrow. Oh my God. Solaroli rushes to Visconti and says, what do we do? She's pregnant. And Visconti says, well, she cannot make the movie. It's clear. So they start thinking, who the hell can make the movie tomorrow morning? Because we are already here and we are shooting. And they come up with the suggestion of 3 actresses, and unfortunately, we don't know who were the other 2. But they get in touch with the producer, the big producer in Rome, who makes up his mind and says, let's try with Clara Calamai. Who is Clara Calamai? Clara Calamai is an actress who has played leads. She's not very famous yet, she's not a great diva, but her last movie, La Cena delle Beffe, has just been released, and it has been very successful. And she shocked the audience because for nearly 1 second she appears half naked. And it's nearly 1 second. Literally 20 frames out of 24. She is with her breasts naked. And Dandi, the producer, says, we have to go to Milan because she has been acting on stage, but she should be finished, and she lives in Milan. Let's grab her as soon as she's back. So, Solaroli, the line producer, leaves Ferrara with the train and rushes to Milan to grab her, but he knows that from Rome, as the news that Magnani maybe will not make the movie after all, even if she's settled in the only room with bathroom of the city. Maria Denis from Rome, which is another diva of the moment, having heard that maybe Magnani will not make the movie after all, is traveling to Ferrara in order to tell Visconti, here I am, ready, take me any moment. So we have 3 actresses converging to Ferrara with 1 room. The good news is that Solaroli arrives in Milan, persuades Calamai to accept the movie without having read the script, because most probably he offers her an extra money on top of the allowed official contract, because there was a sort of fixed contract that actors had then. And Calamai says, yes, I'm ready. Listen, I have my luggage that I've come back from this play that I was on. I don't unpack. I just carry on and take the first train at 1 o'clock, and tonight I will be in Ferrara. The moment Calamai arrives without having read the script, without knowing what she's going to do, and Magnani and accepts to be hosted in a smaller room without private bathroom on the back, because she says, I'm perfectly happy here, there's not much sun after all, even if the view is over the courtyard. Magnani understands that she's lost. and also being persuaded by her makeup man, Alberto De Rossi, who was the famous makeup man of the moment, that it was not a good thing to be pregnant in the heat of Ferrara all the summer, working so hard. She confesses that she's not 2 months pregnant, but 5 months pregnant, and that does it. The contract is cancelled. Producer is so happy that she goes away that says, keep the money that we gave you as for the signature, and everybody's happy. Alberto De Rossi leaves Magnani and starts to work on Calamai, and we have 2 pictures of the makeup test for Calamai the next morning. She's not happy at all, because first thing he does, he takes away the false eyelashes that she has, and messes up her coiffure. And when she understands that the only outfit that she has for the movie is that black dress, she's really very, very disappointed. But they start working. The shooting goes on long. You see the way that Girotti and Calamai look at Visconti. They are not really very convinced of what is going on. And the aristocrat shows his ring, which does not leave much good to think of him as a film director. But anyway, they go ahead, and shooting ends November the 10th, while the son of Magnani is born October 29. Just to underline the fact that they did right. The film is released the first time, the first public showing is May 43. Therefore, relatively long editing. Why? The writers, the screenwriters, were quite perplexed, because the movie they saw on screen was not the movie that they had written. They thought of a much more political movie, while the image had sort of taken over and had underlined aspects that they didn't really expect and foresee. But anyway, when the movie is presented to the audience the first time, Vittorio Mussolini, the son of Mussolini, is there. Vittorio Mussolini was the director of the magazine Cinema, to whom all this bunch of people belonged, and was also the initiator and the inspirator in Italy of the birth of Cinemateket, and the great sponsor of Italian cinema as not only a work of art, but also a tool of propaganda. And apparently he was rather furious. And his comment at the end of the movie, before leaving the hall, was, "This is not Italy," which is very eloquent. The film was released in the public theaters, and in each city lasted 2 to 3 days, because the authorities, the police authorities, stopped the film being projected, being screened, and in a few occasions they called priests to bless the halls after the film had been released. Nobody thought it was anti-fascist. They simply thought it was terribly morbid and obscene. As the first screening was mid-May, and as in mid-July fascism collapsed in Italy, and then we had the German occupation, and the really bad time of war started in Italy. You can imagine that the career of the movie in the cinemas was finished in no time. The film vanished. During the German occupation, the negative was lost. After the storm of the war passes in 45, the war ends, and soon after we have on the screens, beginning with Open City, Rome Open City, all different kind of movies, all different kind of stories. Nothing ever will be the same. Ossessione becomes, in the memory of the people who have seen it, a myth. The first movie that told the truth. The first attempt to tell our stories and to tell our country and to tell our landscape, to tell our land. But nobody had seen it. And it was painstakingly put together from bits and pieces of different copies from Visconti himself at the end of the 50s. The film was released in other countries other than Italy in the 50s, during the 50s, not before. And mostly heavily cut. The length of the movie ranged, the movie released ranged from 100 minutes to 140. Can you imagine the mess? So, was it really the mother of Neorealism? Well, it's very debatable. What Visconti said is definitely yes. If not for anything else, just by the fact that the first time that the word Neorealism has been pronounced is because of Ossessione. Visconti never saw the rushes of his movies. He sent them straight to the DOP and to verify the quality, the technical quality, and then to the editor. He only saw the rushes at the end of the shooting. When Mario Serandrei, his editor, received the first rushes of the movie and saw them, wrote Visconti a letter saying, "This is something completely new. I've never seen anything like that before. I don't know how they describe this style. Maybe Neorealism." So it's the first time that this word is used, this neologism, is because of Ossessione. Visconti said that from the narration point of view, the film was definitely linked to the suggestions and reminiscences that he had from the French cinema. So it had nothing to do with Italian cinema, but was the son of French cinema. And Visconti said, after all, we are always born out of something. This movie is not born out of Italian cinema, but of French cinema. Many colleagues there are other elements that are strongly neorealistic. especially the surrounding, the landscape, the man that is described and told and narrated inside the landscape. The fact that the film is entirely shot in real places. There is no reconstruction, there is no stage, nothing has been rebuilt. It's all true places. But it's dubbed. After all, many neorealistic films are dubbed, practically all of them at the time. What is non-neorealistic is the fact that it's still in Italian, doesn't use dialect. From Roma Città Aperta, all the neorealistic movies use dialect. Colleagues of Visconti have denied the fact that the film is neorealistic, especially Monicelli, for instance, that used to say this is rather neo-falsism, because it's all constructed, it's all built. Look, can you imagine? There are 4 people adjusting Massimo Girotti, who wears just a hat, after all. So everything is constructed, is built, is arranged, while neorealism is just grasp reality as it passes by. Think of Paisa. This is neorealistic. And yet, there is another aspect which is to me definitive, and it is what Moravia says about neorealism. Moravia knew the movie because he knew the movie very well. Visconti had given the script to Moravia to double check and give an opinion on the dialogue. So the name of Alberto Moravia, who's a distinguished Italian novelist of the 20th century, is not on the credits, but Moravia had a say in the movie. And the way Moravia describes neorealism is, to me, the best description of what neorealism is. And I'll let you hear, even if most of you don't speak Italian, but it's a very short quote. It's just 50 seconds, and Moravia says, what is neorealism? And then I will translate it in English. But first I have to deal with this.
Il neorealismo fu non soltanto un'esperienza artistica, estetica, ma anche morale, in questo senso qui, che come sempre succede nelle rivoluzioni del gusto, ci fu una liberazione da schemi, da abitudini, cattive abitudini soprattutto, che erano insieme estetiche e morali. Cioè rappresentò veramente una rivoluzione liberatoria, e le rivoluzioni in arte sono sempre formali, anche se sono morali, cioè si esprimono e si servono di fatti formali, ma hanno delle implicazioni evidentemente morali. Ora, nel caso del neorealismo senza dubbio ci fu una liberazione morale da ciò che era stato la falsità, la retorica, anche la convenzionalità dell'epoca fascista, insomma.
What Moravia says is, neorealism was not only an artistic and aesthetic experience, but was also a moral experience. As it happens always, whenever there is a revolution in the taste, then there was a liberation from all the patterns, the habits, mainly bad habits, that were at the same time both aesthetic and ethic. In other words, Neorealism was a liberating revolution, and revolutions in art are always formal, also when they are essentially moral. They express themselves through the form, but their meaning and their implications are clearly moral. And in neorealism, we definitely witness a moral liberation from all the lies, the falsehood, the rhetoric, and the conventionality of the fascist era. This is why Ossessione definitely is a neorealistic movie. And now, to end, I wanted just to... where is the arrow? Where is the arrow? Here. Good. I found it. As in all the stories, we nowadays, at the end of the movies, we are always told what happened afterwards. What happened afterwards of the main actors of the movie. Here you see Girotti and Elio Marcuzzo, who plays the Spaniard, the Spanish guy, the ambiguous character in the movie. Well, poor Elio Marcuzzo probably was very ambiguous himself, because, strangely enough, after having shot Ossessione just in 43-44, he had a bad idea to travel to Berlin, and everybody found that rather strange, and word spread round that it might be a spy, a fascist spy, and so he was caught by the partisans and shot dead. Calamai, what happened to Calamai afterwards? Not much. She continued making movies, quite disciplined and quite professionally, but her name stayed linked to Ossessione for her life, to the point that 15 years later, after Ossessione, also Visconti called her back to play a very, very small role in his movie called Le Notti Bianche, where she plays, again, Giovanna Bragana. What would have happened of the character of Giovanna Bragana if she hadn't died in the movie? And we have her here. What happened to Massimo Girotti? Not much. Massimo Girotti was a very, very nice, extremely good-looking man, very professional, but not a great actor, let's face it. He said about Ossessione that that had meant the passage from being a physical actor to becoming an actor of thought. And he later said that ruined, destroyed my career, because after that moment I had learned the lesson that you should always make movies you really strongly believe in, that are work of art, and that you commit yourself completely. And therefore, I've been offered so many characters and so many movies that I turned down because I didn't think that they were good enough. And all those roles were played by Gabriele Ferzetti, who's had a fantastic career, and my career was destroyed. But Visconti continued to call him, and he acts and plays major roles in many Visconti's movies, up to the last movie by Visconti, L'Innocente, and there he is. And what happened to Magnani? Well, we know. She's the only great actress that was not in the movie, but the others were not up to her standard. And she played in Rome Open City, that you all think that she was the lead. She was not the lead. She plays a minor role in Open City. She dies after 20 minutes of movie. So she's not the lead. She had to wait to become the lead in a movie. And one of her great works is just this Bellissima, made with Visconti because she had this open story with him that wasn't fulfilled in Ossessione, and they had to make a movie together. And we are back to scratch because when I came here the first time, I came here to talk about Bellissima, and we close the circle. Thank you very much and enjoy the movie.